There we go. Now we're recording. So, anyway, real great thanks that you made this time and space to join in this, I don't know, wildly explorative workshop. And I'm not agonized when I do workshops. I really spend a lot of time thinking this is going to be terrible, but the good thing is that I spend a lot of time thinking about it, and it usually turns out all right. I want to say, as I know this is recorded, I want to say big thanks to the organizers, because just getting this whole event organized is just a huge thing. And it's also really cool that I get the chance to actually have a space like this. So, and I took the opportunity, because this was a global conference, to ask kind of like a global question. Like, where is Solution-Focuse going? It seemed like the right place to ask that type of question, because we can get together like from all these different time zones and all these places in the world, to agonize together, I guess. What are we doing, and what are the stories that we are telling ourselves about the practice, or what are we noticing, or what are we observing, and just share all that. It's great that we get that space. I was also agonizing about this, but I wanted to also give thanks. I suppose maybe this is a political thing, but I just want to give thanks to the Earth for letting us do this, because we're all zooming up and doing things that have effects on the planet that we live in, and some other planet is also part of is enabling the space too, just to get us together. And so I just want to acknowledge that. Not much that I can do about the negative effects of what we're doing, but at least bring it into the space that I'm aware of it, and I just want to honor that, I guess. I'm going to attempt to do kind of three things with you. First of all, I want to tell a story a little bit about what got us here, and what are the threads that maybe are planted a long time ago that might still be growing, that might still be useful for us to think about. One of my messages, I thought, or many of my ideas that I've been thinking about, is that many of our influences are still growing. Like Gregory Bateson's work is still relevant. It's still being done through Nora's work. She's doing immensely great stuff, and I'm really inspired by that. And that's changing the way I look at the practice, because it didn't stop when Gregory Bateson wrote his last book. It's still evolving. It's the same thing with MRI, how that is changing into maybe we're making most use of the microanalysis work, but it's coming from that. We're making use of that, and it's changing the way we look at the way our practice. And maybe also other threads, like and we don't maybe talk so much about postmodernity, but there's a whole bunch of literature being done, post-modernity, or post-capitalism, or post whatever, and even the other version of we weren't even modern to begin with. So we've deluded ourselves to think that we could control nature and control the world, or control a conversation. Maybe that whole thing was a delusion. So there's a whole bunch of literature around that, but I'm also kind of fascinated about, and I think that also somehow keeps evolving, and also gives us new eyes to look at our practice. And while I do this kind of historical look back, I also want to acknowledge that it's not just an intellectual history, practice, theory-based or idea-based history. There's also a social history, where we are both conditioning, or being conditioned, or influencing, or being influenced by things that are happening around us, our time, our places, where BFTC evolved. It wasn't just a fluke. That things were happening there because things were happening elsewhere, and things were moving along in time and space. And I think even now things are moving along and changing. So maybe this also changes the way we look at the way we see things. But the social history is also important, because I think, especially today, this manifests as a global world day. Solution-Focuse is a global phenomenon. So it's everywhere, and not just in therapy. It's in all types of work and living and parenting even. So it's crossed all the boundaries, and so what does that do for the practice? I think this opens up a whole bunch of opportunities to ask different types of questions, And what is it what we're practicing or doing, or can we even talk about it as a practice and doing? Maybe it's more of a living. Maybe something more expansive, or we might get to that. So that's the first thing I'm going to try and do, is some type of historical recap. And I don't want to take too long doing that. There's a risk that might take too much time, but I'm going to try and keep it short. The other thing I'd like to do is engage in a conversation with you lot. I'd really love for us to, just be wild and free with our thoughts and think aloud. Where do we see solution focus going? What are we enabling it to become moving forward? What are the possibilities that we are noticing or sensing? What could be? And so I'd like, and for that, I might put you into breakout rooms, so we get to, feel wild and free while we explore our thoughts. And then, sum it up at the end, and just, have some type of debrief, or where we can summarize and maybe listen to what we're learning at this time together. Does that sound all right? So roughly 3 areas of work. I want to start off by sharing something. Let's see. I have a few things I'd like to share. Just first of all, kind of a quote. I think Gregory Bateson is more relevant than ever. And I have this on a sticky note, which I see every day. We can never be quite clear whether we're referring to the world as it is or to the world as we see it. It's hard to talk about the practice without. We're also a part of the story. The one who's telling the story is also telling something about themselves, and it's really difficult to separate the two. Sometimes I think we think we're talking about the practice as if we're not part of it, but we are. And the way I look at it is naturally going to influence the story I tell, and that goes for everyone. I just wanted to get that out there. The other thing which I kind of like is this kind of triad, kind of 3 things that kind of seem connected, but actually gives us more opportunity. The first thing is Gregory Bateson's quote: "It's never just this and nothing else." So when we're talking about things in a complex relationshiping kind of world, where things are not what they seem, not always what they seem, at least, it's good to be reminded that it's never just this and nothing else. We can always look at this from a different perspective, from a different point of view, and things will change. And Insoo kind of echoed that with, that's a way to see it, and there's another way to see it. And the same goes with our history, right? We can look at it in one way, but then a few moments later, we can look at it on another way. And it's the same with when we do the practice too. But I also like Vanessa Machado de Oliveira. She's the author of the book Hospicing Modernity, which I recommend a lot. She says it's both and more than, and it's moving. And I really like the moving aspect of that whatever we're looking at is not still. Our language often tricks us into thinking things are still. We have lots of nouns in the English language, but in many indigenous language, what we usually have as nouns, they'd have as verbs. So they wouldn't see that, well, there's the ocean, or there's the tree. They would say, look, that's treeing, or that's opening, or that's seeing. Things are moving. They're never still. And I think that's also the case with our practice, with our work, that things keep moving all the time. And treating it as a movement is different than treating it as something that's still and being able to be confined and controlled. Anyway, so just a little bit of entry point into, I don't know, maybe the atmosphere or the headspace that we're moving into. I also want to share this, because this might help me tell the story of Solution-Focuse. This is my timeline. I don't know if you've seen this before, but a few years ago, I created this timeline. I was trying to figure out what was happening when in the Solution-Focuse history, and this, I might be telling things to you that you already know, but it's still good to have this as a kind of common ground, and also kind of pay our homage and respect to the people who've gone before. As you know, Gregory Bateson got this award, received a grant, research grant, really huge, really significant research grant in the early 50s. And John Weakland was part of that from the beginning. They zipped over to the west coast of the States and took up camp, as it were, and eventually wrote this article called Theory of Schizophrenia, which is the first article which really introduces the interactive perspective on therapy. And a couple of years later, he got the MRI, which they founded. And then Gregory left. And I'm still trying to figure out why he left, but I think part of the story was that meant the MRI looked at it as very confined. That the ideas emerging from Gregory's work and that group's work were, he thought it was much broader. What he was talking about was not just about therapy or brief therapy or treatment. It was about life, and not just life within humanity, but life in general. And he has a history of moving out when things become contained. Anyway, I don't want to get too much into all the history, but a lot of what we assume is the basics of solution focus is already here. From Milton Erickson, you got resource activation. From MRI, you have the whole interactive view. Many of the things that we assume as the basic solution focus found already here. And we have, Steve coming in and Insu meeting up and BFTC getting together and their research, trying to figure out what works well in when a client and a therapy work together. I'm really fascinated by the early history of the BFTC era, from 78 to like 85, where they actually they don't talk about solution focus. It's being discovered, and I take this. I find this incredibly fascinating when I'm doing teaching and training in solution focus. That can we somehow create the process for our students where they discover solution focus for themselves on their own terms? And I think this is what they were doing at the time, and it was all very exciting for them. And I think after like 85, 86, it becomes very kind of technical, and which is kind of logical because the people, the way I look at the history anyway, is that they were getting lots of interest from outside BFTC or what they were discovering. And already established therapists and social workers were interested in the new thing, and the new thing were the kind of questions they were asking, or the approach as we see it. So maybe the how we spoke about the approach became kind of technical, kind of reduced to questions. They even tried to do this coding system, where you could you figure out what questions to ask. If they do this, do that, kind of thing. And naturally that doesn't work. But there was a big kind of technical thing where even the solution where it was solution focus was thought of was very connected to the miracle question, for instance. Also, a nice thing that's happening in this area is that postmodernity comes up as a kind of joint theoretical background of structure. And so it's not just BFTC who are learning solution focus this way, also others. You got narrative therapy, motivational interviewing, you got appreciative inquiry, you got all these different types of inquiries coming up to the fore, as it were. And there was also interactive learning between these different therapies, but somehow mid-90s, these different therapies were not collaborating as much as they were before, and maybe were more moving into their own kind of identity territories. So I think solution focus became more insular in a way. And maybe this is natural. They're gathering their own speed, they're gathering their own social environments. and their own kind of organizations and their own conferences. And they're also, at this time, also becoming much more global, moving over and also traversing different fields of practice. And then we have, I suppose, kind of significant for our practice is that maybe our two most famous names, they die early on in the 21st century. And socially, Solution-Focuse keeps on growing. I mean, there are still people teaching, and there's institutes, and many of the disciples, as it were, of Insu and Steve are very active and keeping the torch going, as it were. And we have Mark, and who's moving a Solution-Focuse more and more into the organizational field and stuff. So I want to stop sharing. So if we look at some of the basic strands of this kind of history, we have Milton Erickson and Gregory Bateson's work. And I find Nora Bateson's work today doing incredible stuff on warm data, and where she's looking at how information comes alive, really, and how information is moving, and it's much more than what we say. It's much more than transcripts. It's much more than things that we could write or ask about. Communication is, she talks a lot about the message is the meta message. Things that we are actually saying is not actually being heard. So we might, like for instance, we might be asking the client, so does this question, does it work for you? And but what the client is actually receiving, it may be that the client is important for the process, but that's not what we said. But so the meta message of communication is kind of the container for the information, as it were. And I think that interesting when it comes to like talking about tone or pace or how we work with silences and how we work with gestures and how we work with space in general and atmospheres. And I think that's a whole realm to explore, which kind of gives us an idea of where we might be heading, I think. For instance, in my own trainings and teaching, I've been thinking of hedging. What happens before we ask questions? What makes the questions enable? What enables a certain question at a certain time? I'm much more attentive to how I create the space that enables a creative exchange, rather than thinking about what is it I'm going to ask, what is the question I'm going to ask, what is the process I'm doing. I'm much more interested in what is being enabled at that time and trying to be responsive to what's happening then and there. And I think this comes a lot from studying Nora's work, and especially her latest stuff on readying, how we become ready for change, how we become ready for new perspectives, how we become ready for a new way of looking at things. Another thing which I'd like to add, which might say something about where we might be going, is I've also been kind of interested in the work that Bayo Komolefe is doing. I don't know if you've come across his work. Bayo Komolefe is kind of a young African man he lives and works in India, but he's kind of a global thinker, as it were. And he's introduced me to a whole bunch of stuff which I find really interesting, which kind of takes on the post-modernity kind of work. For instance, for the work for Deleuze and Guattari, I picked up a woman called Erin Manning from Toronto. She's doing work on neurotypicality and movement, and her work on minor gestures, small things that enable change, and how things become in the moment rather than how they are. And I think, and for instance, another thing that they've been talking about is instead of talking about interaction, they talk about intra-action. So instead of presupposing two separate bodies meeting, they think we're actually creating each other in the moment as we meet. So it's much more of a within contained process rather than two people from the outside meeting up. And these are all kind of nascent ideas for me grappling, but I feel that there are other ways of looking at the practice, which is maybe not tied in modernity as the way we used to think about it, but maybe much more creative, maybe much more. There are other ways of looking at the practice which will influence the way we look at it and describe it. I could say more about that, but I think I've already said enough for the moment. So anyway, any questions at this point? Reflections. Am I making any sense? Alan?
Making a lot of sense, but it's like drinking out of the fire hose a bit.
You're drinking out of fire hose, right? Thank you. Yes. Thank you for that. I'm kind of hoping what I'd like to do now is to set you off into breakout rooms, if that's okay. And I'd like to try something new. I haven't done this before. I'd like to try 2 breakout rooms in succession. So first have one breakout room, 15 minutes, and then John T, goodbye. And then have a second breakout room for about 10 minutes. And the first one, we could be, I want to divide you up into two groups. And then the second round, we're a smaller group. And just to reflect, and I was thinking if I wanted to give you a question, but I just want to give the opportunity to reflect on the question that brought us here. Where is Solution-Focuse going? If the taxi driver asked us, where are we going? Where would we say the global practice of SF is going? What are the signs and sights that you are noticing? Would that be all right?
Thanks, Jonas. I'd love to stay, but I've got to go. Thanks,
Yeah,
mate.
John, yeah, good to see you.
Yeah.
Cheers, John.
So if that's all right, if you want those questions, I'm going to put you into breakout rooms. And I'm going to create 2 breakout rooms. Now we are. What I will do, I'll create 2 breakout rooms and I'll join one of them, and we'll have a 15-minute just thinking out loud together, and then we'll meet back here in 15 minutes and just share what we are thinking. Is that all right? So here we go. I'll jump into room number 2. There you go.
It was really sorry. It was really revealing for them how one could shift, looking at things that they look, but I don't know whether I made any difference to them or not. But now I'm just thinking of coming back to Social-Focuse, field in some way. So I'm aiming to start attending conferences. Today is my first one again. It's awesome. So nice, and very interesting conversations. I've already made some, very important notes. So yes, thank you.
I want to say, great to see all these new faces. We've been out in breakout rooms and thinking about, where's Solution-Focuse going, or what's happening in the Solution-Focuse world. And I suppose we can all just join in the conversation, right? And just, what are we hearing or learning or thinking? And I'd like to, what was happening in them. I suppose we're having conversations here in this large room where people just joined in when we were away. That's fine. But I'm also interested in what's happening in the breakout rooms, where we got the chance to talk to each other about, where Solution-Focuse might be going.
Well, our group just got kind of parachuted in because we ended one session and suddenly we were all together, a bunch of strangers. So I think I was the newbie in the group. There's just a ton of knowledge and experience in the group I was in, and seems like we're all a bunch of keeners. And I've just found out about SFBT over a year ago, and I'm all in. I've drank the Kool-Aid and the whole 9 yards with Elliot and company. And I know Alan. I meet with Alan, with a group of us meet with Alan as our leader, and we're learning a ton for over a year.
Oh, that's great. That's good to hear. That's really good to hear. So tell me more. What's going on? What are we noticing about what's happening in the Solution-Focus? We had Marcella and Alan and I suppose that we're also grieving a bit because there seems to be a bit of fragmentation going on, not just in the political world, but also maybe also in the Solution-Focus world. But I also think we're moving forward in a way because more and more people are doing Solution-Focus work, I think. I don't know, maybe I might be wrong about this, but I think Solution-Focus is spreading. More and more people are getting the news, and that's good. That's good news, right? Anyway, so anybody want to chime in and what are you noticing around?
I'm curious about the fragmentation. What are the signs you're seeing?
Well, this came up a little bit in our group, right? That maybe the bigger organizations aren't really connecting that much to each other. You know, EBTA, SFBTA, SFU, Australasian. Maybe we're not meeting as we used to. I don't know about that. I think there are people naturally meeting each other, but maybe, I mean, we don't take the plane as much as we used to and fly around and meet up with each other. So, but on the other hand, we're having these kind of conversations, which we've never had before. So, so we do get the chance to meet up in ways that we didn't used to. So, I don't know.
Well, and I had talked a little bit about just kind of the push and pull between I was trained by the founders, like I was trained by Insu and Steve, and this is kind of, I guess, SF purist.
Right.
And then there's no, it should be as brief as possible and kind of going in a different direction. And then, there's Elliot Cunning's and Adam's diamond thing. And so just kind of, okay, so what is it today? And I kind of want to have the both and. I like the original, but then I also really find value in some of the newer ways of thinking as well.
Can that work with everyone? Because, I mean, I think for myself, I find it all really interesting and I love the way it works. That's one of the things I really appreciate. And watching that different people work in different ways. So it really, really is. So I'm the only solution-focused practitioner in a whole service of mostly CBT practitioners or counsellors, BACP in the UK.
Right.
And I always felt very lonely and I didn't quite know where I fitted in. And suddenly there's a range of different types of solution-focused practitioners. And, I work with university students, some who are really academic and like the theoretical stuff, right? Some who just need almost like a dummy's guide. I don't think that rudely. There's books called Dummy's Guide that are really introduction service. Good, don't need to be rude. Right, where the clear-cut, simple, what are your best hopes? What are your resources? Go. It's perfect. It just works so well. And I do think it is spreading. It's which is brilliant for me. Certainly, I think it's wonderful. I'll stop talking. I'm waffling.
That was great, Susanna. I loved every word. Anton, Gunnel, and Jerry, you were in a breakout room, right? You want to share anything?
Our conclusion was that Solution-Focus future lies in Brugge.
in Bruges. What's happening in Bruges?
Anton has to tell you about that.
Yeah. Well, maybe first something about Bruges. I just had a call yesterday with somebody who is responsible for the community of Bruges for everything that has to do with healthcare. And she's new to Solution-Focus. She's studying at the Korzybski Institute. And she says, wow, it's amazing. Ever since I started to work in a Solution-Focus way and I started to learn and read about it, I discovered Solution-Focus practitioners everywhere in all the institutions that we have. And it's amazing. And there was a little bit of frustration. How come we don't know that? Why is everybody so silent? She was very enthusiastic to bring resurface all these solution focus potential in the city. So that was nice to hear. And I think many more people are practicing solution focus than we ever will realize and know. Yeah. Something else I wanted to share, Jonas, is 2 days ago we had our Solution Focus World Day event in Ghent, another beautiful city in Belgium. Ghent, Gand, Chili. And we had over 120 participants.
Wow.
And we called it the Festival of, we use the word polyphony now. Multi-voicedness, and we use the Dutch word of meerstemmigheid. So meer is multi, stem is voice. Meerstemmigheid is probably the same in Swedish.
It is the same in Swedish.
I think we speak the same language. And we really wanted to celebrate the fragmentation.
Right.
Between the fragmentation between academics or theory and practice, fragmentation between coaching, therapy, consultation, and what have you, the fragmentation between the different approaches or the styles that people have. We had 8 different workshops, and everybody brought another version of Solution Focus.
Beautiful.
And that was beautiful. And one of the participants wrote it beautifully on her Facebook page afterwards. Wow, this was like a play garden for me.
Right.
Because my home is in difference. Not indifference, but in the difference, in being different. She's from Holland. She works with us. She falls out of a lot of traditional categories, and being there and being able to celebrate all the differences instead of the identity was that really made her blossom during that day. And I think I like the differences and all the fragmentation in the field that makes it that keeps it alive. And I think that's also what Steve and Inzo intended when they didn't want to form a school or define Solution Focus, and said that Solution Focus is nothing more than a rumor. So that there's very many different versions of it.
Beautiful.
And that there's not one true version of it.
And I wonder if we're moving into a different space now. I think one of the reasons why I wanted to do this workshop or to create this kind of space was that we're also in a time where many of the people who were kind of the disciples of Steve and Inzo are now retiring. So we're, in a way, naturally more fragmented in a good way. If you want to follow on from your perspective, there aren't that many people who are acting as gatekeepers or looking backwards. There's more room for new voices and new directions and new meeting places. And I find that refreshing. I don't want to take anything away from people who have devoted their lives to developing and training and institutes and all the gatekeeping and the discipling is all good stuff. I mean, we've learned so much, but maybe we're moving into a different phase where we can be more appreciative of the diversity of our fields, and maybe not looking for the right way or try to control it in some way. Maybe it's good. I don't know. More voices. Catty, you're on. I'd love to see you and hear you. You're on board. I saw you nodding and smiling and to many.
Yes, and I've seen Barbara raising her hand.
And Barbara is raising her hand. Thank you. So Barbara, you go first.
Barbara is over there.
Yes.
Go ahead.
Okay. I just wanted to say that I've been involved with, I don't want to repeat what I said in the breakout room, but I've been working in different ways with Social Focus for the last 26 years. And but one thing, I just wanted to share my experience from the latest training that I've done, which I only actually realized today by listening to previous sessions, so I've done training. I worked with prolific offenders, so with repeated offenders, and I done training with one of our colleagues from Solution-Focuse, who is also associated with a brief in London. We trained police officers and prison officers, and I only realized, I don't know whether they grasp some of the idea of the Solution-Focused talk, but I think the main achievement, what I was thinking, was to actually counterbalance the dominant narrative.
Right.
That for the first time they were really challenged. There was some, they question everything and so on, but they were forced to see this group of people who are either imprisoned or being arrested by them as human beings in a very different way. So I think I've already kind of planned my battles, to fight. And one of those battles is to challenge the dominant narrative.
Yeah.
For me, especially around people who are already have no voice, that are doomed, and nobody is interested in them. So I think Solution-Focuse had a really good, it's a really good way of doing it. So that's just one of my experiences. Thank you.
That's great. And I really love that bit of, like we're saying, that you can become really engrossed in the method or in the way of working, or the way how whatever noun we use to describe it, that the theory, the history, the practice, but also just something little can do a lot. That something very, very small can resonate and grow and mean a lot for many people, for many interactions going forward. I find that beautiful in a way, that we don't have to. It's not the whole package. You can just have a small bite, and that bite will leave you changed.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Thank you, Barbara. That was lovely.
Yeah.
Katty, would you like to chime in?
Yes, I'm so happy to be here, that I bumped in here, and it was so fascinating to follow the word fragmentation.
Yeah.
Because as it was first stated, I said no, and then it became really attractive. So I don't know how you talk here, guys, but it seems that you allow things to change within one conversation. So thank you for that. That's really fascinating. That will be probably one of my highlights. I tell in the closing Europe phrase. That was really marvelous. And I only recognized Marcella afterwards, but that you are here from SFPTA on my screen. But I see a lot also of coming together. So when the Swiss Association makes an event together with SFiO, what is it? It's quite cool. Or just get to knowledge about 5 practitioners who internationally decide to come together once a month and learn together. Reminds me, of course, the group of 6 of many years ago. But so these things, or the other thing I had to think about when the word fragmentation developed here was, and I'm not good enough in quoting it yet, and as far as I know, it wasn't published, but yet. But Hesan already quotes the coaching study where they compared coaching conversations done by different schools, so representative of different approaches, including solution-focused, and how they could show sameness which are very close to solution focusedness. So kind of an emerging sense of, hey, it's worth checking how does it look like where the person wants to get to. And it's a good practice if you check, okay, on what's already happening into that direction as main ideas about coaching, even if the theory of that approach was not necessarily suggesting it some years ago. So maybe there is fragmentation as well, and there are really fun instances out there too. So that was just my commenting slightly.
That's lovely, Kathy.
Thank you very much.
So what else are you thinking? What else is happening in the if we're responding to the where to question? What else is happening around? What else are you noticing?
I think there's a strong movement of SF practice away from SFBT, in that we're seeing solution focused in so many applications. Commercially, high performance sport, high performance industry, all those, and moving away from this idea that this is a modality of psychotherapy or counseling. And I think it will be interesting to see whether there is a fragmentation, and not necessarily a bad one, from well, this is how we use solution focus in a therapy setting. Now, it may be different when you're using it to build the best car manufacturer, right? No, I don't know, but it's an interesting question, and I see this developing because people will adapt the, I guess, positional stance of SF into different situations, and yeah, it could be interesting.
Yeah, I was wondering about. I was speaking to some older practitioners as they retired, and they've been working in schools, and they were commenting the fact that when they were working with solution focus in schools in the 90s and stuff, they always felt that they were like second grade or second class, because first class was a therapy world and the school world was not as good. But I've never really understood that, because I think we're all learning from each other. All right, we're all being inspired by good practice, however in whatever context it shows itself. So maybe that's something that's changing. Maybe it's something that we're becoming more appreciative of, this variety of contexts of the global phenomenon as it has been. It's becoming. Paul,
sorry,
you have your hand, Paul.
I do.
You do.
I'm wondering if we could be rethinking some form of qualification or badge or acknowledgement of people being solution focused that doesn't follow only a therapy model. So if you want to get, for example, the UK SFP certificate, and I've been involved in that as a assessor and on the group that developed it for very many years, it's always been give us a tape of your first session with the other person for an hour. And working in organizations doesn't follow that model very often. To provide something to show. I know that the clues did take that into account, and that may still be around in some form, but it would be great if UKSFP, for example, had a much lower level entry. You're doing SF if you do this, and if you show us this, we can give you our stamp, and people can then hang together in a club by more than the name of the club, but by things that they are doing that indicate that they are SF in some fashion.
Yeah, I wonder about that. We've been having these discussions in Sweden too about accreditation and stuff, and there's very little interesting accreditation in Sweden. I don't know what it's like in the rest of the world, but the Swedish association, the equivalent of the UK SFP, they modeled it on the UK's model, and only 3 people have gone through it in the last 6 years. So the interest is very low about just getting that seal of approval.
Huge amounts of work's gone into it in the UK.
Yeah.
In order to accredit a dozen people,
right?
Maybe a couple of dozen over many, many years, and that's fine. I mean, it's a high-level qualification that was partly designed to be the equivalent of years of therapy training that's accredited by other associations. So this would be a yes and that we have that, and we have something that maybe is a lot easier, much more broader in its recognition of solution-focused practice, and that then holds together what it means to be solution-focused in a way that's got some kind of credential authority or peer recognition that we don't currently have.
I have a question about that. And forgive me, and I try to figure out how to raise my hand and couldn't, but so like I'm from the counseling world, that's my license, but I'm curious for other fields, what difference does it make if someone gets the certification that you're talking about? Like, what difference does it make as far as, consulting opportunities or, so I'm just curious.
Well, we don't know because we don't have it, but we know that in the coaching world that there are some competing or complementary coaching qualifications that do make a difference to who gets hired. If you've got the qualification, you're more likely to get hired because it says something about you. It's a badge that you've done this, that, or the other, whether that's based on skill or based on time served or just paying a fee to join. And we don't really have, as far as I know, any equivalents of that. And that would have to be something that we do at community level, an association level, for it to have any value. And it might then drive up the value of being one of those people. But that wouldn't be my primary interest. My primary interest is that it would be a way of defining recognizable and reputable solution-focused approach that's useful in and of itself for the people that do the defining and do the participating in getting it.
Thanks.
Just building on that, there is one thing I observe in the coaching world again, where the certification thing can get to a world-creating force. It's just now happening that there is a new certification in team coaching, and suddenly there is a criteria to team coaching. It has to be 5 months long at least, and this is why I think sometimes we should keep an eye and a word in these discussions, because otherwise it gets stupid. Or so, but I'm also unsure. It's not about my personal energy. I want to put it in there, but it has also a generative, yeah.
Barbara, go ahead.
What about call it Global 24 and certify for each other that we are part of this group and that we talk, competently about aspects of social, of solution focus.
Yeah, well, I love the idea that we actually have this conference that we every year can get together and talk about whatever we like. I love that. Susanna, you've got your hand up.
Yeah, I can't put my hand.
Oh, I can see your hand, so that's great.
I've got no real one. No, I have a real one. I don't. So sorry. I'm really interested in actually the conversation about qualifications, etc. Because I come from a background, I've done my training with Brief and Brief International, but I don't have, to be honest, I don't have the funds to get to the current UK ASFP course. So I haven't got there yet. And unfortunately, until my children stop spending my money, it's going to stay that way. It's life. But my colleagues who are CBT practitioners who've done a 2-day course, in the world's eyes, are better qualified than I am because they have an apt course thing. So they are better solution-focused qualified than myself, who's done training since 2016. So yes, I'm a member of the UK SFP. I do, but if there is something, honestly, there's got to be something that makes it more of a, like, this is what we are. But certainly within, it bugs me, I put it in the post as well, the NHS, they use Dialogue Plus as a scale now, which is how satisfied are you with your mental health on a scale of 1 to 7? Don't know why, but there you go. How satisfied are you with? So they make it solution focused. You then need to follow this up with problem-based scales, which are on a scale of 1 to 7, are you likely to kill yourself? So it's interesting. I have 2 strands to this conversation, I suppose, and I'm sorry I'm hogging, but I do think the more accreditation stuff solution focused practitioners can get, the more solid a service, regardless of which strand they come from. Yeah. And actually, NHS and other services, wherever they are using solution-focused work and claiming it as solution-focused. Is it? I don't know. Has parts of it. Take that as you will. I'm curious as to other people's thoughts about.
I think it's interesting. There are 2 things I'd like to say. One thing is we have the ICF, people like Kirsten Deeroff have been doing amazing work in normalizing solution focused within the context of coaching in general. And I think, and they've done amazing work to make solution focused part of that world. So in that, there are ways of getting accreditation or seal of approval, through ICF, which is an international standard somehow. But the other thing is, and I suppose it goes to what Anton was saying before, that Stephen Insuhr designed solution focus to be more like a rumor, but there wasn't a body of controlling an element that, and despite that, it's still growing, it's still alive, it's still moving, it's still exciting. There's we're still within this kind of below the surface. There's a whole lot of interaction and creativity and learning going on, and maybe it doesn't fit the kind of dominant discourse or the criteria of the dominant discourse for what is valued, but it's still going on. It's still happening. It's still something, and I think, that's beautiful. That's just a different way of evolution in a way. So we hold it lightly or lighter than other people, and maybe that does have consequences for some, of course, but it also opens up opportunities for others.
In view, Jonas, of some of the things that have been raised here by Susanna and others, have you thoughts, or just the rest of the group have thoughts on what could happen or might need to happen even to bring the SF world closer together towards some of these common projects? Or do we just accept that people will fragment because that's how people are, and box on as best we do? Just thoughts?
I don't know. Does anybody want to respond? I find it fascinating too that the solution focus somehow is also much more normal today than it used to be. That there's something very satisfying about that. It's generally accepted as a, good value-based way of working. People like to be seen as resourceful. People. It's and social constructionism is it's a very general theory that most people can accept as kind of like a way of speaking about difference or people in general. It's different. It's different. So there's something normalizing about the practice, which is it's more accepted today than it maybe used to be. I suppose that I don't know. I haven't really thought about this. This is an interesting conversation. Go on, Marianne. I think Marianne was first, and then Barbara.
Okay, so yeah, I'm new to this, and I think maybe in the past though that people were kind of throwing around, oh, I just asked the miracle question, I do SFBT, right? Whereas now, there's so much more research and whatnot being done, and several of us were just in Adam Frower's and others research workshop. Thank you. And like the results were just awesome, and I think everybody will want to ask for those slides because it was just super.
Wow.
Versus like, oh, you just sit there and ask questions. Well, it doesn't appear to demonstrate that that you're doing anything different than anybody else could do, kind of thing. And anyway, it was just really awesome.
Barbara, and then Stefan.
Yes, just a small note. I've seen assessment forms, for example, in social services and children's services that are clearly solution focused, but solution focus is not, it's not acknowledged in the paper. So what you're saying, maybe we don't need to be recognized, formally, but the practice is definitely spreading in very, very different directions. I just wanted to say that I've been involved in design of games, and we use solution focus as well in gaming. So, the sky is the limit, I think.
Yeah. Stefan.
When is your workshop actually, Barbara?
Lovely. Stefan.
Yeah, thank you. I asked myself, how popular is solution focused in the let's say therapy world? Because when we talk together, then we have a feeling that at least to some extent it's somehow established, if not to the full extent, but somehow. And I can share. Recently, I was involved in a case. It was a couple who had a challenging time, and I thought it would be an ideal case for Elliot Conant, for example, because I know how he's doing that. And it seems that in therapy, so when you go to the most paid, or the best paid therapist, at least in this was in Austria, they go straight to a psycho dynamic approach. What's wrong? You're depressed. You're whatever. And at first we have to fix that, maybe even with pills, and then we can start working on the problem. This kind of thing. I was a bit surprised. As I said, I did not talk to the therapist, but it seems that it's still a well-established approach. Or am I wrong? I don't know if it looks in other countries.
In an earlier conversation today, I was asked to talk about solution-forced thinking. And I wonder sometimes that, we as a community, I think at least in the 90s and the beginning of the 21st century, I think we spoke of ourselves as being a little bit apart from the world, looking in, so we could look at those that, oh, they're old school, or that's the bad way of working, and we pride ourselves that we knew a better way. And I think change is slow. I think things will, I mean, these things take time, and maybe maybe we're becoming a bit sometimes be a bit solution forced, because we're kind of impatient. We think this is so easy. Why isn't it taken on board by everyone tomorrow? Right? And there's notice that things happen slowly, and that's good. I'm kind of pleased that I've stuck with it, last 25 years. And now hearing stories of people saying, "Oh, this is normal. This is the way what other way are there to think?" And change takes time, and that's fine. And I think there's a lot to be said about just accepting that, change is slow, especially cultural change. And what we're still all doing collectively is just looking for the signs things are going right. And on that note, I don't know if Gunnar is still here. Is she here? Yes, she is. Yes, she's written one of Sweden's best-selling books on solution focus. It's the most selling book, and which is based. And tell them, you got to say something about this, Gunnar, because this is also a sign of the times.
Well, isn't it? As you know, it's not just a book. Well, thank you also, Jonas, for mentioning it. It's not just a book about solution focus, because what I do. I was thinking about this. We talked about fragmentation, but I rather work with integration. So I integrate solution focus, appreciative inquiry, positive deviance, positive psychology, strengths psychology.
But you can move this one up.
Wait a minute. Somebody's got their.
Okay, thanks.
I'm gonna try
I've written a book about looking for what's right in yourself, in others, in your world or in your life, and at work. So it's 4 different parts, and solution focus is a big part of it, but it's not only solution focus. I've also started to be more active on my Instagram account, trying to spread these ideas, because I'm a speaker. That's what I do. I try to inspire people to use these ideas in the workplace. And it's really, my Instagram account has grown from 3,000 to 23,000 in a few months. And people just love these ideas. It's really, it's very easy to sell these ideas. I just try to inspire people to have a more solution-focused or strengths-based approach. That's what I see as my mission.
And I think you're doing great work, Gunnar. You really are.
Thanks, Jonas.
And I think
that's something to say about. What's your Instagram handle?
It's in Swedish, so I think it won't be of any use to anyone. I'm afraid.
Okay. Awesome.
If I grow more, maybe I will.
There is so much translation nowadays in social media, so.
Yeah, it's true. But I do reels, so I mostly do reels. So I speak in Swedish, and the subtitles are in Swedish. Maybe it's possible to get some translation. I don't know, with AI and everything.
True. Inka, you had your mic on for a second. What are you noticing in around you about how solution focus is evolving or moving or changing, or what's happening?
You know what? I think it's very interesting. Can you hear me?
Yeah.
I think it's interesting between noticing that change can be slow, as well as that feeling of moving away from this is special, this is something new, and we're going to change the world concept.
Yeah.
There's a bit of both.
Yeah.
There's it's this slow, and there's, I think the more you use it, for me, the more you start to feel like you're losing the nostalgia of, I'm doing something special, I'm doing something radical, I'm doing something it starts to feel familiar. It starts to feel like elements of it have always been present.
Yes.
And there's a lot more of, it present than was noticeable before. But is it still something that definitely has a space? It's taking space. It's taking space. It might not feel as radical as it was now. It feels like it's just spreading and permeating into a lot of different spaces.
Yeah.
Which is something wonderful. I hope it doesn't become just another tool that we just apply and it doesn't have that deep meaning that solution focus can actually have.
I really resonate with that. I think I do my best work when I don't even know I'm doing solution focused, or I even announce I'm doing solution focused, or when like I had a conversation with a friend, and he said his practice is changing, and he's been doing solution focused for like 15 years. And he said these things are changing a lot now. And I said, what's changing? How are you noticing? Well, I'm asking the right questions. And my first thought was he's become more technical. He's brainy. He's doing deeper work. But it was completely the opposite. Because I asked him, how do you notice these better questions and the right questions you're asking? Well, I'm only helping the client continue their thinking. It's more about the answers than the questions. It's much more about the answers than the questions. And I just love that it wasn't about us. It wasn't about him. It wasn't about the questions. It was about the answers. It was about something moving that the client was proud of, that they were exploring and being inspired by. And the role of the therapist was hardly anything, but he noticed that it was making the difference. But he didn't have to flash it. He didn't have to, that was a solution focused conversation. I was doing solution focused. Didn't have to do that. Just had to be, it was so like a feather. It was almost unnoticeable, but the conversation was beautiful. And there's something about that, doing even less and somehow creating even more. And I think just to we're in our last minute or two now. I don't know if I have the right to finish this off somehow, but somehow I think this is what the world needs right now. Take a step back. Don't rush into things. Take time. Be interested in other people's answers more than the questions that you're going to ask. Something about not forcing ourselves onto things and trying to find solutions. There's something about the name of Solution Focus which is a bit off-putting right now, but I think we all know what we mean when we say it. But I don't think people outside know it that well. But as long as we keep at it and just notice the world the way we notice the world, then maybe that's enough. For now, at least. And I think there's going to be plenty of opportunity for conversations moving forward. Coaching conversations, helpful conversations, in whatever context and world we live in. So maybe this is just the beginning or the continuation of more conversations. And I hope to see you all again sometime.
Thanks, everybody.
Great. Thank you, everyone.
Awesome.